Alright guys, so I have yet another absolutely wild story here for y'all on another Democratic politician being caught engaging in just cartoonish levels of corruption and bribery. So here we have US Congressman Henry Cuellar, who was just charged with bribery and acting as a foreign agent. So we're going to read most of this press release that was just dropped by the Department of Justice in a second, but as we're reading through this, I want you guys to think back to that story that I covered on Bob Menendez, who was caught with like gold bars and cash stuffed into jacket pockets at his house when it was raided in regards to his corrupt dealings with the government of Egypt. And I want you guys to tell me, does this level of corruption here from Henry Cuellar approach the levels of gold bar Bob Menendez? Okay, so let's get some of the details. They say here, Congressman allegedly accepted approximately $600,000 from Azerbaijan's state-owned oil company and a Mexican bank in exchange for official acts as a member of Congress. So here we go. They say, an indictment was unsealed today in the Southern District of Texas charging U.S. Congressman Enrique Roberto Henry Cuellar, who's age 68, and his wife Imelda Cuellar, age 67, both of Laredo, Texas, with participating in two schemes involving bribery, unlawful foreign influence, and money laundering. Congressman Cuellar and his wife made their initial court appearance today before this magistrate judge. According to court documents, beginning in at least December of 2014, we're going back 10 years, and continuing through at least November 2021, Congressman Cuellar and his wife allegedly accepted approximately $600,000 in bribes from two foreign entities. So we have an oil and gas company that is wholly owned and controlled by the government of Azerbaijan, and a bank that was headquartered in Mexico City. The bribe payments were allegedly laundered pursuant to sham consulting contracts through a series of front companies and middlemen into shell companies owned by Imelda Cuellar, his wife, who performed little to no legitimate work under the contracts. In exchange for bribes paid by the Azerbaijani oil and gas company, Congressman Cuellar allegedly agreed to use his office to influence U.S. foreign policy in favor of Azerbaijan. In exchange for the bribes paid by the Mexican bank, Congressman Cuellar then also allegedly agreed to influence legislative activity and to advise and pressure high-ranking U.S. executive branch officials regarding measures beneficial to the bank. So he's helping out two different entities here, this bank in Mexico and also this wholly owned state oil company in Azerbaijan, okay, and therefore the Azerbaijan government as well. Okay, and he's doing this by using a whole complex web of different shell companies to try to hide his corruption and using his position as a member of Congress to influence legislation on those entities' behalf. Now, I do want to make the point that I talk a lot on this channel about the totally legalized corruption and bribery of the U.S. political system, right? We allow giant super PACs, corporations, billionaires to essentially funnel infinite money into our elections to influence our political system to the point now where it's so rotten and it's so corrupt that it doesn't even remotely come close to actually serving the interests of average working class Americans, okay? There's about a 1-to-1 correlation between what corporate America wants and what gets passed through legislation, and there's almost no correlation with what working class people want and what gets passed in correlation. We know this according to the data, right? And so that's sort of the baseline criminality, or something that should be criminal, and corruption in our political system. I think that we should address that kind of political corruption in the same way that we would address this kind of more overt pay-to-play or quid pro quo, I'll give you this, you give me that kind of corruption. Because at the end of the day, the result is the same, right? Are you actually serving your constituents, or are you serving some other entity because they've given you a financial incentive to serve that entity? And again, the methods by which you do that, whether it's in $600,000 in shell payments through different various companies versus getting a super PAC to finance your campaign, it really just doesn't make a difference. It's just two different avenues, one of which we have completely legalized in this country. But anyways, we continue with some of this because the actual punishments they could face here are pretty interesting. Now, before we get to the potential sentences that they could be up against here, I want to show you guys the just the like hilarity of the particulars in this situation, because we have a couple different quotes from this document here. So this is from the Associated Press. The indictment alleges an Azerbaijani diplomat referred to Henry Cuellar in a text message as El Jefe, or boss, and that also, I mean, this is just mafia shit here, guys, and also that a member of Cuellar's staff sent multiple emails to officials at the Department of State pressuring them to renew a U.S. passport for an Azerbaijani diplomat's daughter. So you're also roping in your staff into your corruption here. And then they say Cuellar was at one time the co-chair of the Congressional Azerbaijan Caucus. Huh. That's interesting, right? Maybe something to look into there. We also had this. I mean, it gets even better. From March 5th to 8th of 2015, Henry Cuellar and a Mexican official, one unnamed in the indictment, exchanged messages about finding another middleman to further disguise the bribe payments. The indictment states, quote, in one message, this Mexican official told Henry that, quote, we need to find another scheme for the foreign bank 1 because entering the contract directly with shell company 1 was not recommended. Guys, they're literally talking about in text messages, we need to find another illegal bribery scheme to try to cover up our tracks. I mean, I don't know how they think they're going to get away with this, but at the same time, it's like, again, we have legalized corruption and bribery in this country. Do you really have to go out of your way to do the actual illegal corruption? Like, it takes a lot for you to be indicted for corruption as a politician in the United States of America. We are one of the most openly corrupt countries on the face of the planet. I mean, you basically literally have to say, as it looks like they were doing in these back and forth emails and texts, you basically literally have to say, you give me this, you give me money or a gift in some way, a car, whatever the case may be, you give me this, and then I will go and I will give you this, okay, in the form of legislation or whatever the case may be. It has to be that overt in order to actually be prosecuted or charged or indicted with this kind of corruption. So Henry is going above and beyond here. He's going out of his way to try to become a corrupt criminal. Now, the second half of this story is that guess who was one of Henry Cuellar's biggest proponents? It was Nancy Pelosi. So here's an article back from May of 2022. So keep that date in mind here, May of 2022. The title here is, in case you're wondering, Nancy Pelosi is still supporting the only anti-abortion House Democrat. So at the time, Henry Cuellar was running a very tight election against this more progressive candidate that was in the Democratic primary. And we'll get to the final results of that here in a second. But it was an extremely close election. Nancy Pelosi comes out and she basically says, yes, I'm standing with him, even though he's anti-choice, okay, he's against abortion rights, I'm still going to stand with him against the pro-choice progressive opponent that he was going up against. And if you keep in mind the timing of all of this, this was literally right before the Supreme Court ended up overturning Roe v. Wade. And this was already in the ether, it was in the, the conversations at the time that this was something that was going to happen. And so even knowing that Roe v. Wade was being overturned, she still decided to support this anti-choice Democrat, right? And I mean, some of the quotes here, guys. I'm supporting Henry Cuellar. He's a valued member of our caucus. The FBI has said he's not under investigation. Before quipping, I thought you were going to ask about choice or something, right? He's not pro-choice, but we didn't need him. We passed this other bill, the Women's Health Protection Act, when it passed the House and then it failed in the Senate. This is such a weird statement to me. The FBI has said he's not under investigation. So keep in mind, this came out, this article, May 12th, 2022. So this article came out January of 2022. So this was months before Nancy Pelosi was just saying, yeah, the FBI has given him the all clear, essentially. So this is from January. FBI raid on House Democrats' home related to Azerbaijan probe. So this was after the FBI raided his home, okay, for potential corruption involving Azerbaijan, which is exactly the thing he was just indicted for 2 years later. So months after the feds raided this guy's home, Nancy Pelosi was still coming out and basically trying to give the implication, yeah, the feds have given him the all clear, right? Nothing corrupt or nefarious going on here. So, the people of Texas in his district just had a complete overt criminal, representing them instead of the potential progressive alternative. Here we had Jessica Cisneros. And if you look at the results here, guys, 22,901 for Henry Cuellar versus 22,612. Okay, he won by 300 votes, guys. If Nancy Pelosi did not come over the top and aggressively support him during this election, then in all likelihood, Jessica wins. And we could have avoided all of this, right? But there's the Democratic Party for you, right? We don't care that he's anti-choice, right? One of the core planks of what Democrats are trying to run on in these elections. We don't care that he's anti-choice and he's conservative on a whole host of other issues as well. Essentially a Republican. And we also don't care, apparently, that the feds just raided his home in regards to a corruption probe. And so that's how you end up in the position that we are right now. Now, again, I'll finish off making the same point I made at the beginning of this video. We need to treat the currently legal forms of corruption and bribery in the form of lobbying and super PACs and the rest of that campaign finance. We need to treat that in the exact same way that the DOJ is treating this current indictment of a quid pro quo. Because the alternative is that what? We're trying to give the implication that super PACs and billionaires and corporations dumping millions and millions of dollars into all of these elections, that has no impact on anybody's policy positions. These corporations, these billionaires, they're just giving them that money out of the kindness of their heart without anything expected in return. That's the whitewashing, essentially, of the corruption in this country, is this pretend game that, our campaign finance system is not directly legalized corruption and bribery. And so anyways, I'll finish off with that, criminalize corruption in the United States of America, especially for politicians. These are people who are supposed to be representing their constituents, and instead they're selling themselves out.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying